Hello and welcome to A Year of Hitchcock Movies. We are your hosts, Jeff and Diane, and this is movie number 12, The 39 Steps from 1935. A suspense thriller with international espionage, political terrorism, a love story, a madcap chase across the country. Excellent. This film is loosely based on a book from 1915 called The 39 Steps, written by John Buchan, and serves as the prototype for what will become North by Northwest, remade many years later by Hitchcock and starring Cary Grant. Hitchcock was a great admirer of John Buchan. John Buchan was a Scottish author and politician. He was the Canadian Governor General in 1935 when our movie was being made, and he was the Governor General of Canada up until the time of his death in 1940. Hitchcock did meet with him during this period. He particularly liked the basic idea of this book, but he and Charles Bennett thought it a little bit dull. Charles Bennett being his new best friend, they would sit around and with their diabolical sense of storytelling would come up with more interesting, compelling, and entertaining ideas for their movie, The 39 Steps. And more importantly, the studio, Gomar British, was allowing them creative control, something that they had not had up until this point. I mean, you remember The Skin Game. The author had a contract with the studio saying that none of his dialogue was to be altered in any way, or The Lodger, when we had, Hitchcock wanting to end the movie a certain way, but the studio saying, no, our Ivor Novello, our matinee idol, can't be the bad guy. So this is definitely a change for that with Gaumont British. Now he could pretty much do what he wanted, including bringing in the people he wanted, his friend Charles Bennett. They worked well together. And for dialogue, they brought in someone named Ian Hay. Ian Hay was a playwright known for his wit and excellent dialogue. In fact, it was from one of his plays that the often quoted line, what do you mean funny? Funny peculiar, funny haha, was taken from a play from this guy. He'll write the dialogue for this movie and the next two movies, Secret Agent and Sabotage. That's interesting. Hitchcock was also able to bring in the actors he wanted for this film. The stars of the movie in this particular case, Robert Donat and Madeleine Carroll. Robert Donat plays a Canadian businessman visiting in London. You might recognize Robert Donat from the movie he'll make 4 years later, Goodbye Mr. Chips. Robert Donat actually won the Best Picture Oscar for his portrayal of Mr. Chips in that movie, and he beat out Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind, no less. So that's interesting. Madeleine Carroll is our blonde leading lady. She was a big silent film star in the 20s. She made a good transition to sound films. Hitchcock's wife, Alma, as early as 1928, was a big fan of hers and hoped at that point that one day she would play a leading lady in a Hitchcock movie, which she does in this one, and she'll also star in next week's movie, Secret Agent. Interesting. After which she'll go on to Hollywood, and she will become a big star. By 1928, she will be the highest paid actress in Hollywood. That's something. So how about a little background? You don't need a ton of background for this one because it's not all confusing, but our hero, Richard Hannay, played by Robert Donat, he's a Canadian visiting in London, and he goes to a vaudeville show. There's a commotion among the audience, shots ring out, everybody files out of the theater. He meets this strange, exotic foreign woman who immediately asks him to take her back to his house, and as any Canadian visiting in London would do, he obliges. She starts telling him tales of espionage and murder. They retire to their separate quarters, and sometime in the night she is murdered. Our hero is suspected by the police, and suddenly he's on the run, being chased by them and bad guys who are part of an international spy ring, and there's your movie. Sounds fun. Now Hitchcock had been directing films for about 10 years at this point, his own films for about 10 years at this point. Does it show? Is he starting to get the hang of it? That's the fun part. And keep The Lodger in mind in particular, the movie we started out with, number one. Again, you had a man falsely accused of something, being chased, and we'll probably realize just how long ago that was. There is a Hitchcock cameo to look for in this one, but we're not going to spoil it by telling you where it is. And we're watching the Criterion version of this DVD, and that's important because this is a completely restored movie. It's got a much better picture than what we've seen in previous movies. There are subtitles in this version, which is excellent, so put those subtitles on when you're watching. And there are some extras on this DVD that we'll talk about at the end of the movie. This movie with trust and betrayal, danger at every turn, and not everyone is whom they appear to be, from 1935, a year where Julie Andrews was born. We'll see her again in the movie Torn Curtain with Paul Newman. That's a good one. And also a year where Donald Sutherland was born, another fine Canadian. So now, from 1935, Hitchcock's The 39 Steps.
They'll get you next.